Welcome to the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. I'm your host, renowned sex and relationship coach, Amanda Testa. And if you are looking to reclaim your sexual desire, take sex from a to-do to something you look forward to, and enjoy deeply connected relationships without adding more to your already full plate, then you are in the right place. Listen in to discover how to fan the flames of your feminine fire, fall in love with your sensual self again, and experience intimacy like never before, all in a way that feels really good to your system. Make yourself comfortable and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Feminine Fire podcast. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of talking with a true luminary in the field of sexual wellness and empowerment, Dr. Emily Nagoski. I am so thrilled to have you back. And today we're going to be talking about what to do. How do we find the desire to have sex? How do we find which actually isn't desire? And if you're looking for what it really takes to have great sex and long-term relationships, you're going to love this episode. Emily's groundbreaking work is truly phenomenal. It has helped so many countless people understand their unique sexual selves and create lasting, joyful connections. She's also been in this field for over 30 years as a sex educator. And if you have worked with me or are familiar with this podcast, you know how much I love and recommend her first book, Come As You Are, as well as Burnout. And now, just when we thought it couldn't get any better, Emily's newest book, Come Together, has just launched. And it's all about the science and art of creating lasting sexual connections. So thank you so much for being here. I am so thrilled to have you back.
I'm delighted to be back.
And we were actually just talking because one of the things that I think is really challenging, especially at times like these, is how in the hell do we find our way to pleasure when it feels like everywhere we look, there's some other fire? And literally and figuratively, right?
Yeah. And I was, as you were saying, times like these, I was like, when was the last time it wasn't times like these? Like, it has been a minute. Like, it's just, life is hard these days.
Yeah, I think that's true. Last time you came on, it was during the pandemic.
And like, that was times like those.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a while before we can walk through life and feel like this is about the right level of difficulty for life. I'm not saying life is supposed to be a piece of cake, but it's going to be a while before life feels like, oh, it's going to be easy for me to create the time and energy in my life to really savor pleasure, which is what I ask people to do with the book.
Yes. But I think that's the beauty of it too, is like, where can you find the little pockets of it? The little places you can.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that you talk about all the time, about pleasure being the measure.
Yeah.
And you've created such an incredibly brilliant concept here and Come Together around creating a blueprint, like looking at a visual of, oh, look at all these different rooms. Which one is going to lead me to where I want to go? And I would love if you would share a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yes, it is my favorite idea in the book. It is the thing that changed my own sex life. I should say the origin story of the book is that writing my first book, Come As You Are, destroyed my own actual sex life with my, I should say, newlywed husband. Like, we had been together like a year when I started writing Come As You Are. And you might think that thinking and writing and reading and talking about sex all the time could be really sexy. It was not, because I was so stressed from the process of writing the book that I lost all interest in actually having any sex. I finished the book. Things got a little better, but then I went on book tour and it got a lot worse, which is when I went to the peer-reviewed science, as any good sex nerd would, to find out how do people do it? How do couples sustain a strong sexual connection over the long term? And the most important piece for me was not actually any of the sex science itself, but this foundational research from the father of affective neuroscience, Jaak Panksepp, who talks about the 7 primary process emotions. So these are the 7 universal mammalian brain emotional states that we can be in, motivational states. One of them is lust. And I was like, how do I get there?
Yes.
Because I knew that if I could just get there, wherever that was, the sex I'd be having with my partner would be great. One of the benefits of being a sex educator is I communicate extremely well. I know what feels good for me. And the sex I have with my partner is very enjoyable for both of us, which is a benefit that not everyone listening to this has. Like when they imagine what sex would be like if they decided to have it today, they'd be like, oh, that would not be worth cordoning off an hour and a half of my life to make space for that. But it would be for me. And if it would be for you, and yet you are struggling to get there, wherever there is, this is the tool that worked for me. So there are these 7 primary process emotions, like I said. Some of them are pleasure favorable, where when you're in that brain state, it is easy for your brain to interpret any sensation as being potentially pleasurable, something to move toward with curiosity and pleasure. And some of the spaces are pleasure adverse. And of course, those pleasure adverse spaces typically are the stress-related ones. So these are the easiest to think about because they're real familiar to us. Most of us in high school, we learn about fight or flight. So rage is the fight space where your brain is in a state where it feels like there's a risk for potential attack, and the brain interprets its best possible survival strategy in this state is to try to destroy whatever is the source of the stress. So neurologically, when you are angry, like high intensity enraged with your partner, neurologically, your brain is like, destroy that.
Makes sense.
Right? And I know a lot of people, the reason I start with rage is like we're talking about feminine fire. I have talked to a surprising number of women who are like, I think I don't have a rage space. Girl, yes. You really do. And actually, like, I'm most worried about the people who are like, I'm not sure I have a rage space, because it means they have a rage space. That's the Monica's closet from Friends.
Yes.
It's like a Monica's closet of their whole life's experiences of injustice, just like big storage tubs full of it's not fair. And if you've got one of those, then there's some time in therapy to be spent unpacking those storage containers full of all the times when it was not fair, truly. And like releasing that rage from your body, which will lower your blood pressure and your cortisol levels, and your body will be so much more well because you allowed yourself to release the rages you've been holding on to that you did not even know you had. So that's the number one pleasure adverse space. A woman asked me, she'd been married for many years. Her kids were in their late teens, early 20s. And she was like, I thought that at this time of life, my husband would start to step up. And like, I have done everything I can to support his career for all these years. And now I want him to step up for me, and it's not happening. And Emily, how am I supposed to want sex when I have all this rage? My friend, you are not. My friend, you are not. That is not a space that has you can't get directly from rage into like, ooh, sexy, feels good space. Another very familiar space is the fear space, the flight one. This is where your brain senses that there are threats, and your best chance for survival comes from trying to escape, run away. And this is the space that I was in. This is the one for me. So just as the rage space is everything from slight annoyance and irritation through all the way up through the high intensity of rage, the fear space is everything from slight worry all the way up through terror, and anxiety lives in the fear space. And I was so anxious. This is, for all I knew, it was the only book I would ever write. It would be my only chance to get this right. And just like the pressure and the stakes, it felt so high, and I was taking it so seriously. And when I would try to follow my own advice, right? Responsive desire. You put your body in the bed, you let your skin touch your partner's skin. And for a lot of people, a lot of the time, if you allow yourself to let your skin touch your partner's skin in an affectionate touch, your brain's going to go, oh, right. Oh, I like this. This is a good idea. We should do this again. And instead, I would get in the bed, let my skin touch my partner's skin, and I would cry and fall asleep. And what I finally realized is that when I was in this stressed out, anxious state just all the time, when my body touched my partner's body, instead of interpreting that sensation as like, oh, sexy, yay, it went, oh, I'm with the person I trust most in the world. I'm safe now. I can relax. And the crying was my body releasing all of that stress, all of that fear, all of that anxiety that I've been carrying around. And when I got done with the tears, what was next was how just sheer physically exhausted I was. Hence, I would cry and fall asleep. And I realized when I was reading Jaak Panksepp's research again, because like I tried to find a place for this research in Come As You Are. Come As You Are is already 100,000 words long. It did not fit. But when I was reading this research, I was like, oh, I am in that state of mind. I need to find a way to transition out of the fear and into that lust space, which is pleasure favorable. And I actually like drew pictures. I was like, what is the relationship among all these spaces? So this is a very long answer.
I love it though, because it puts so much context to this why it's important.
Yeah. So let's talk about the third pleasure adverse space, and then we can really focus on the pleasure favorable spaces, which is where the superpower lives. So the third pleasure adverse space, the third part of the stress response, it's called the panic, grief, sadness space. It's where depression lives. It is where freeze, flop, and fawn live, the other F's of the stress response. So it's the stress response where if your body perceives you as there as being threats around. The fawn response is where you try to appease or make peace or like make people calm down, fawn in your relationships. Flop is when you just shut down. It's called panic grief because it's about the ways human bodies, well, all mammalian bodies, but human bodies in particular, have this incredibly intense attachment mechanism. Babies die of loneliness, literally. Like you could meet every other biological need. We've known this for decades now. And adults, human adults, even though we don't die of loneliness, we sicken from it. Loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in its impact on our health. And so when a baby is lonely, it will cry. This is the panic of like, oh no, I'm alone. Something bad could happen and no one would be there to save me. This is the thing about human babies is we're born so helpless. We require our adult caregivers literally to keep us alive for years in our life, like years. Like we need our adult caregivers to come. So if we're like, oh no, I'm alone, that's bad, we cry and panic. And hopefully an adult caregiver comes and scoops us up and we can be like, oh good, I'm not alone. But suppose baby keeps crying, I'm alone. Oh no, something bad could happen. I hope somebody come and pick me up. Nobody comes. The crying escalates. And at a certain point, the infant's brain assesses its situation and figures out, oh no, no one's ever going to come, which is where you get the grief part. Their brain pushes them off the panic cliff into a pit of despair. And you can hear the change. Anyone who's a parent knows the change in the cry from the panic into just like the despairing wail of, I am alone and no one is coming to help me. Does that make sense? Sorry to go so dark so early in the conversation.
That makes total sense.
But when you're in this space, doesn't it make sense that it would be difficult to experience pleasure?
Yeah.
You might
Very much
experience interest in sex because one attachment behavior that human adults engage in is sexual contact. One of the ways that we repair damage to our attachment and our relationship is with sex. But that's not a state of mind where you're going to experience a lot of pleasure. You're just going to experience a lot of like relief, like, oh, I saved this relationship. I'm not going to be alone. I'm not going to die alone. I'm not going to be alone forever. So that's the third pleasure adverse space. When people are there, it is really difficult to be interested in experiencing or sharing erotic pleasure. So there are 4 pleasure favorable spaces. I've already talked about one of them. It's lust. This is the one where you're in that state of mind. Your brain is ready to interpret lots and lots of experiences being sexy. And it's there specifically for sex. And sex for humans is almost entirely social. A little bit of it's about reproduction, but it's mostly just about social, adult bonding connection. Childhood sexuality is very individual. Like the lust space is there, but it's just like me and my body and like, oh, that feels good. And there's a little bit of sexual play, but like the sexy like feelings part is like just me. This belongs to me, my body. I'm exploring, like, because you're born, the only thing you have with you on the day you're born that you have on the day you die is your body. And we spend our childhood figuring out what kind of cool shit our bodies can do.
Yeah.
Because they can do really cool shit.
They sure can.
Lust. Another one that's going to be really familiar to people is the care space, which is this attachment mechanism, this bonding. But care is so vast in human brains that it takes on a lot of different characteristics. I think of it as an open plan room, like in a house where if the kitchen and the dining room and the living room are all one big open space, that's the care space. It's huge and it has a lot of different functions. And when you're in the living room of care and you're like sitting on the couch, there's a crackling fire, whether it's a wood fire or an electronic, just like a picture of a fire, like you're like cuddling with your certain special someone, you feel cared for, you're feeling motivated to care for them, and they're like touching you in a way that feels really trusting and affectionate and delightful. For a lot of people, when they're in that space in care, there's just like a pathway directly into the lust space from that experience. There is not for me, let me clarify, because everyone's brain is different. And so if you're hearing that and you're like, yes, when I have that feeling of being held and cared for and loved, like, oh, yes, that definitely leads to like feeling like a sexy space for me. And if you're hearing that and you're like, nope, that is also normal. People just vary. And let me add that because care is such a huge multi-purpose space in our emotional brains, there's also what I call the kitchen of care, which is the taking care of. This is the adulting, taking care of children function. And if anyone's a parent, I am not a parent. I know this from my friends being parents and from talking to my own mother. There is a thing that happens in your body when somebody hands you a child and says, here, this one's yours, keep it alive. Like, even though you are exhausted and you are frustrated and you just need some sleep and children get really heavy and you have to we would leave them by the side of the road if they were not so fucking cute. And they're that cute for a reason, yes, which is to keep us like in love with our babies. There's nothing, no matter how exhausted you are, nothing will stop you from getting up and holding your child with love and being like, I am glad you are here and I want you to feel safe. I'm glad you are here and I want you to feel safe. And oh my God, can we go to sleep now? Nothing can stop you. If that is how you feel if you feel like you have to take care of your partner as if they are your child, that's not a sexy experience, right? Except for some people who fetishize and eroticize the experience. There's like all kinds of like baby play that adults can do together. If that's a thing, I am in no way kink shaming folks for that. And if you feel like you are having to meet your partner's needs on a day-to-day basis in the same way that you have to meet a child's needs on a day-to-day basis, that is not the same thing as sexy play. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Great.
And also too, that makes me think of also moving to maybe the anger, rage space when you do everything and you feel like, or if there's
it's not fair.
Happens a lot. Yeah.
And you're frustrated. Exactly. How am I supposed to be able to do this when I feel so much rage? So it might be that your rage space is adjacent to your care space because it's so easy to get to the rage space from the care space because you feel exhausted and overwhelmed by all the demands that are being made of you. But at the same time, you feel it's connected to your panic grief state because even though you feel exhausted and overwhelmed by all the demands that are being made of you, you still feel like you're not doing enough. And panic grief is where shame lives. So for a lot of people, their panic grief space is also adjacent to their lust space because so much of their sexual feelings they have been taught to feel ashamed of. But you see how, like, if you can put together the pieces, lay out a floor plan of like, when I'm in this space, there is no direct path into the lust space. But if I can get out of the rage space and into the feeling of caring for and being cared for, that care space, then I can get to so what I need is not like sexy underwear or handcuffs or role play or porn. Those are great. If you like them, go for it. But what you really need is time spent in feeling cared for in your relationship, which means having your partner step up in doing the caretaking things that have to happen in order to manage a home, or because you are working such long hours, you need your partner. And I'm assuming in long-term relationships, that does not necessarily mean that you're also sharing a household. But let's imagine for a couple where they share a household, part of what can get in the way is the sense that one person is burdened with all the household stuff and they're enraged and they need to feel supported in their relationship and partnered in the householding so that they can feel cared for, so that they can get to the real like aphrodisiac is not something that has anything to do directly with sex, but how they feel about their partner in their relationship. Two more. Pleasure favorable spaces. And these were the real like turning point ideas for me. One of them is play. Play is the universal mammalian motivational system for friendship. Play behavior is any behavior we engage in for its own sake because everybody involved likes it, and there is nothing at stake. Nothing at stake. You have nothing to lose when you play. We can laugh about people who get intense about games and play because like you can get intense about games and play, but we know deep down, nobody's going to lose anything when you play a game, right? Like when you're playing badminton, you might be like big into the badminton, but at the end of the game, like you didn't have anything to lose just because you lost the game of badminton. There's lots of different kinds of play. Rough and tumble play is one of them. I always like to think about animals when I can with these, or babies, because it helps to explain the sort of mammalian innateness of it. I'm a dog person, so play, I imagine the dog's play bow, where they go, their elbows are on the ground and their ears are perked up and their eyes are soft and their mouth is soft and smiling. And the play bow is an invitation that says, everything I do from now on, I mean no harm, there's nothing at stake, it's just a game, I want to play. And dogs may chase each other, they may wrestle together, and humans may chase each other and they may wrestle together. And play can be just fun play, and it can also be sexy, erotic, chasing each other and wrestling. That is totally a thing that people can do. Play can also be wordplay, games, jokes, laughing. That's the kind of play that, just to like skip to the moral of the story for me, was when I got to a laughing, joking state of mind where I wasn't taking myself so seriously. That was where I was in a space where I could get into the lust space. I could get out of the fear space, take care of myself physically, transition into the play space. And that is how I got into the lust space, was by getting to the play space. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, yes.
And then our last space is the seeking space, or exploration, curiosity. And like for some people, this is going to be learning new things. It can be going to an art museum. It can be going to a lecture. It can be, I have friends who sold all their stuff and traveled around the world together, which sounds like a nightmare to me. I would never want to do that. But they loved it. They loved the adventure of it. Things would go wrong all the time, usually in a place where neither of them spoke the language. And just the adventure and the exploration and those shared problem solving was really bonding. And they now have the babies to show for it. So for me, this was like my primary, when I was in grad school, this is my primary space, because I would date other grad students and we would talk about our research. And for me, talking about affective neuroscience is a path that's basically a water slide between affective neuroscience and the bed for me.
Yes.
But then I finished grad school and I married a cartoonist who did not speak that language. And like all those other relationships that ended because they were bad relationships, the thing that worked erotically in terms of like the space that leads to the sexy place didn't work for us. And I was like, what's going on? Why doesn't this work? And I had to figure out that seeking was not the thing. In this relationship, it was the play space. And here is the real thing for me. When I learned that it was not seeking, and then I stopped beating myself up for the fact that it also was not care, because I was shooting all over myself. I should be able to get to lust from the care space. I feel so loved and supported and protected, and this is the best relationship I've ever had, and I trust this person more than anyone else. This person knows me better than anyone else. This is the best relationship I I've been in, and I say like I got really lucky, but actually I had 15 years of therapy. I earned this relationship. So how come this spectacular relationship does not lead me to feel real horny for this amazing human being? It's because that's not how my brain is wired. Instead, my brain is wired where if I am laughing, if we are playing a game, if I'm not taking myself or our connection so seriously, that is the transition space for me when we can play together. So those are the 7 spaces. There's more. There's only 2 ideas in the book that are so complex they take 2 chapters to explain, and the emotional floor plan is one of them. The other one is the patriarchy. So the moral of the story for me was find the room next door to the room where it happens, lust being the space where it happens. What is an emotional space adjacent to lust that makes it easy for you to get to a place where your brain can interpret any sensation as being pleasurable?
Hey, it's Amanda. If you are enjoying the show and felt a connection to what we've discussed, and you're ready to take the next step in reigniting your passion and enhancing your relationships, I have something special for you. Visit www.amandatesta.com/thegoods, where you can subscribe to my email. And if you want, you can sign up for a free personalized sensuality discovery session with me. In this one-on-one heart-to-heart session, we'll explore your unique desires, uncover any challenges, and set a path for you to experience the vibrant, fulfilling love life you deserve. Don't let another day pass feeling unfulfilled or disconnection. Take action now, and let's start this beautiful journey together to fire up your feminine fire. Join me at amandatesta.com/thegoods. I'm excited to stay connected. Now back to the show. I think it's so
long
brilliant.
answer long,
But it's so brilliant. And I love the visual of it. That to me just like hit me in a new way. Just seeing it on paper and being like, this makes so much sense.
Oh, I'm so glad. The reason the subtitle of the book is The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections is, as I mentioned, I married a cartoonist. And so he drew those illustrations.
I love it. I think that for me, one of the things I learned about myself too is that the rage space is one I like to visit quite often.
Yeah.
And then I found but I can go from rage to play pretty easily.
Ooh.
And because
Can you tell me an example of that?
Well, so something that I've learned to do, if I'm really grouchy or starting to feel that, and I'm like, and I just feel grouchy, then I'll just ask my husband if I can just push on him or if we can play roughhouse. And it's so fun because he's got a good sense of humor and he'll play along. And then I can be and then it ends up being funny. And then we usually start laughing, and then that's connecting.
What a fantastic way to take the emotion of rage, which so many people have a lot of fear around. And play literally means there's nothing at stake. There's nothing to lose. I mean, no harm. So when you ask him, can I just shove you around? Can I push you around? You're doing it in a way that's I mean, you no harm. You didn't do it. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. My body just has this energy. And in a low stakes, let me know if we go too far. I can just shove you and we can laugh about it. And it lets you purge the rage in a joyful way. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that so much.
Especially now, because I'm in the perimenopausal stages of my hinterland of my bleeding years. And I have the spectrum of emotions some days.
Yeah.
Yesterday was one of those days.
We could talk about perimenopause for a long time.
But it was very helpful to realize that. Now, of course, if I go past the point where I'm just livid, then I need just
that's not the same as being mad about something.
Yes. But if I'm just in general, just I feel pissed at the world and I need to let it out. It's not you personally.
It's just generic
of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so great.
I love that. And one of the things too, because I know this is so important and you've talked about this a million times, but just for those that are listening that maybe aren't even realizing how, when we talk about, it's wanting to have this connection, there's a desire, you want to, and then you feel like you need to have the actually sexual quote desire. But we just talk briefly about the desire imperative and how it pretty much screws us.
Yes. The reason why the floor plan can be the answer is because desire is not the thing. And the reason we know desire is not the thing is because there's a bunch of research on people who have extraordinary sex, optimal sexual experiences. Magnificent sex is actually the title of the book about this research. And when you ask them what this magnificent sex is like, desire, feeling horny, barely scrapes into the top 10 characteristics of magnificent sex. Mostly when people who have this kind of sex describe it, they talk about play. They talk about authenticity. They talk about vulnerability. They talk about empathy, connection. They talk about exploring to the edges of what feels just safe enough. They don't talk about feeling horny. Of course, the underlying idea here is that that's really pleasurable sex. They really enjoy the sex they are having. And okay, I'm going to say a sentence that is 100% true. And when I say it, you're going to be like, of course that's true. And yet, it's going to be shocking and revelatory. It's not a dysfunction or a disease not to want sex you do not like, which is why we know pleasure matters more than desire. It is liking the sex. If you like the sex that is available to you in a relationship, then it's just a matter of prioritizing it. Working to create the time and the energy, protect the energy and the time. These are really limited resources. So what are you willing to get rid of in your life to make space for the sharing of erotic pleasure?
I love that. The sharing of erotic pleasure. Even just those words make me feel like, oh,
right?
A smile, just like,
as opposed to like beating yourself up because even though you care about your partner, you enjoy your partner's company, but you just don't feel horny. And then you feel bad about not feeling horny. And you feel like you have to wait until you feel horny before you get into the bed. Like when I was talking about put your skin against your partner's skin, like very often, like if you can get that far, if your life is not like saturated with a looming book deadline, a lot of the time your brain is in a good enough state to be able to be like, oh, really good. We should definitely do this. It doesn't take like a multi-step process to transition out of like where you spend your brain time into a sexy place.
Yes. And I know one of the things you talk about in the book as well, that a lot of people struggle with. And you talk about this because I think it is so common. Yes, but then we have to do all this talking about sex.
I'm going to repeat. Yes, you have to talk about it, but like you also have to talk about, okay, we got tickets to the Taylor Swift concert. We're going to leave at this time of day so that we can arrive in enough time to be able to buy our t-shirts before the concert starts. We can find our seats and get a snack. And then we have the concert and we're going to hang out until the end so we're not caught in the traffic. You have to talk about the party you're going to plan. You have to talk about the garden that you're going to plant in your backyard. You have to talk about your children. You have to. Oh, wait. Or is it that you like love to? You want to because this is your hobby, because this is your favorite musician, this is your favorite sports team, because these are your favorite people that you can't wait to invite to have fun at your home? What if it weren't that you had to, but it's a hobby and you love it?
I love that concept of it being a hobby.
I talked to a Swiss journalist who was like, but if my wife and I said to our friends that like sex is one of our hobbies, they would think that was pretty weird. And I was like, well, I mean, that's my relationship it's a hobby.
I agree.
Is it weird?
It's a good hobby. And I think that's the beauty is just having that example. Because if people are, maybe it's not rewarding, it doesn't feel good, they don't enjoy it, then why would they want to do it like you say?
Why would you want to?
But if it becomes something that feels nourishing and good and fun and enjoyable, then you do want to do it. And so then it's something you look forward to versus like, oh, I got to freaking do this again.
Right. Yeah. Whenever I talk about like scheduling sex, which broadly speaking, I am in favor of, like, I am busy. There's nothing that happens in my life that is not on my calendar. It's not on my calendar. It's not going to happen. So for me, because I like the sex that I have in the relationship that I have, when I see it on my calendar, I'm like, oh, good. A good thing is going to happen. I'm so excited. And like, what could be sexier than my partner cordoning off space and time, protecting this energy, just so that we can do this, let's face it, pretty silly thing that we humans do of like rolling around and licking each other's bodies. Like, how hot is it that they are protecting that time and energy just to be in that state with me. How glorious. But if you see it on your calendar and you feel dread, scheduling is not for you. And if it's because you don't like the sex that's available to you that would be happening in that calendar time, that is the target of intervention right there, is figuring out what kind of sex is worth. What kind of sex would you look forward to having?
Yes, and that's worth talking about.
Right? And yeah, you have to talk to your partner about what kind of sex is worth wanting, what kind of sex is worth putting on your calendar. But I don't know another way to be able to get the sex that is right for you with the partner that you currently have without talking to them about it.
And I think it makes sense, especially because we're talking specifically around long-term relationships here, that things shift. Bodies shift,
Absolutely.
lives shift, things shift. I'm wondering if you
Hello,
would speak to that.
perimenopause.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe would you speak a little bit to how they can use this in those instances, right? Like something did feel good, but now it doesn't, or now I'm in a different phase, or I'm going through an illness, or my mom is sick, or whatever it is, right? The caregiving, that all the things that happen as we go through life's transitions.
So it could be a transitional change that is directly related to sexual functioning, perimenopausal vaginal dryness that causes pain with intercourse, and you haven't yet found a medical intervention that assists with that. My own personal experience is, vaginal estradiol for the win, all day, every day. Vaginal estradiol.
I'm just pumping my arm in the background.
It's just like, whoo, like I wasn't even aware of how much discomfort I was experiencing until my gynecologist was like, well, your vaginal rugae are really flat for a woman your age. I'm gonna make you this prescription. And like my doctor talks to me differently. I am the person that I am, and so she can say these things. But wow, I didn't even know how much more comfortable sex could be if only I were using this like just very local little bit of estrogen. So it could be that. It could be, I just wrote a newsletter actually about Peyronie's disease, which is sort of men, once they get past 50, may have this sort of like scar tissue that builds up in one part of the shaft of their penis that causes it to be crooked. And there can be pain with erection when they have that. And while it has sort of two phases where it's painful and then it stops growing and it stops being painful. But while it's painful, penis pain matters as much as vagina pain. And if you're not talking about it, if you're not finding different ways to connect sexually where people are not experiencing unwanted pain, until you find a medical intervention that's helpful, which there are medical interventions that are helpful, you're gonna get so frustrated and annoyed that things aren't the way they used to be. It's fine that they aren't the way they used to be. My definition, so I have definitions because people love definitions. My normal sex is just any sex where everyone involved is glad to be there, free to leave with no unwanted consequences, and there's no unwanted pain. So perfect sex, because people don't read 100,000 word book about sex because they want to be normal. I mean, they do, but really, they want to be the best sex partner their partner has ever had. They want to be perfect lovers. So here's my definition of perfect sex. It's normal sex, which is to say, everybody's glad to be there. Anybody can leave with no unwanted consequences at any time, no unwanted pain, and everyone turns toward what's happening in this moment with confidence and joy and curiosity and a sense of play. So if an erection is painful and erection is not a thing and intercourse is not going to be a thing, you turn toward the reality that intercourse is not going to be a thing because that would cause pain. You turn toward it with confidence and joy and curiosity and a sense of play, and you find other things to do that are not intercourse that also feel really good instead of doing the thing that would feel painful. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it goes right back to the pleasure is the measure part.
Pleasure is the measure. If you like the sex you are having, you are doing it right. There is a sex therapist in New Jersey from whom I learned this party metaphor. If your best friend invites you to a party, oh, of course you say yes, it's your best friend and it's a party. But as the date gets closer, you're like, oh, it's going to be a long week. Am I really going to feel like putting on my party clothes at the end of a long week? I don't know. But you said you would go, so you turn on some dance music and you trim your ear and nose hair and you put on the body glitter and you show up at the party. And what happens? usually you have a good time at the party. If you're having fun at the party, you are doing it right.
Yes. I love it. I'm wondering too, if it's okay to speak a little bit more. I think because I'm in this chapter and so I'm always very curious, all the things I can learn. And even I think like anything, you can learn a lot, but until you actually experience the thing, you don't have the direct experience of it. But just for some of the other things, as we transition through different cycles of our lives, specifically, we were just talking about perimenopause and just moving through these changes. And also, I think this happens many times too, how body image and like feeling good in your body really stands in the way of being able to want to play, maybe. So maybe if you could speak to that and just, how do we handle that?
One of the realities of, so if you're an It's a Girl, you're born in an It's a Girl type of body and you grow through, as a girl into a woman, one of the realities is that over the course of your hormonal life, where your fat lives on your body is going to change. That's just a part of what the hormonal story is. And so a lot of people will get to the perimenopause situation and they notice that like things are moving around on their bodies and it's moving to places where they have been told they are not supposed to have that fat. Arms, neck, back, boobs, belly. And it happens gradually, but I find that about every 5 years, I need to start from scratch in loving my body. Of like, I do the mirror exercise where you look in a mirror as close to naked as you can tolerate, and you look at what you see and you write down everything you see that you like. And of course, you're going to notice all the stuff you have been told you are not supposed to like. Let's take my vulnerability, my belly. And like, of course, there's going to be this noise in my head, like that didn't used to be there. That's a change that I don't feel good about, but I'm just going to write down the things I see that I like. And you do it over and over again. And the thing is, you have to keep on doing it spaced over years because it's going to change. Like my belly didn't used to be my vulnerability, but things changed. And so like I had to like refresh my self-acceptance. And with that activity, if my partner, my partner who I feel really good about touches my belly, which I feel really good about, that can feel really nice. But without that work, my partner, who I feel really good about, touches my belly, which I didn't feel good about. It would just like hit the brakes and shut everything down. So that process of continuing to love our changing body, recognizing that like there is no season of a tree's life when it is not beautiful, it simply changes. There is no season of a woman's life when she is not beautiful. It's the body simply changes because what a gift it is to have the privilege of growing old. I have a friend who is an anthropologist who said the ones who get old are the lucky ones.
Oh, yes. I love that. It is true. And also, I think it is a constant choice that we get to choose to be kind to ourselves, bring compassion to ourselves.
Yes. And we're going to be confronted pretty regularly by a culture that tells us how dare we?
Yes.
Be kind and compassionate toward ourselves. How dare we simply just like settle for the body that, and I'm not settling for this. This is a freaking gift I'm walking around in. And if you don't like it, too bad. You don't get to touch it anyway.
Oh, I love that.
Somebody else's opinion about my body does not deserve to control my opinion about my body.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And more often than not, your partner still loves your body.
So much more often than not. Like I have been to a lot of conferences, like maternal health conferences, and there's always like a dad's panel. And it's not always dads, of course, who are like co-parents, but on these panels, all I hear over and over again is I didn't notice most of the changes that my partner noticed. And what I did notice, I thought was like just real hot. The menopause conferences, most of the changes she noticed, I didn't notice. And the changes I noticed, real hot. Because this is like a person, because the thing is, okay, so when you look at your partner, you're not seeing the literal objective shape and size and structure of their body. You are seeing all of the experiences you've ever shared with this person. And if this experiences you have shared with this person are overwhelmingly positive, you trust them, you admire them, you feel fortunate to have shared these experiences, then you're going to like what you see because you like what you feel. But if when you look at your partner, you feel the frustration and the rage and the annoyance and like the unjustness that has happened in your relationship, you're not going to like what you see because you don't like what you feel. And there is a subset, there's a small subset of people who were attracted initially to their partner because that partner conformed to a culturally constructed aspirational ideal of how a partner should look. And so if my partner looks like someone that I believe other people will be attracted to, that makes me feel good about myself because other people are going to feel like I have something they want. And then if my partner loses those traits of conforming with the culturally constructed aspirational ideal, I'm going to feel like other people are not attracted to my partner, so they're not going to look at me and feel like I have something they want. And so I don't like myself as much anymore. There is a subset of people who when they look at their partner and don't like what they see, it's not because they don't like the relationship. It's because they don't have enough confidence in themselves. And they believe that they can measure their self-worth by the objectification of their partner. And those are not people worth staying with anyway.
Yes. That is the truth of it. Sometimes when we do the deeper work, that is the fear, but there's often what's coming to your truth, whatever that might be, is always in the end the best.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the surprisingly controversial things that I have noticed talking to people as I've been traveling around with Come Together. So of the 3 characteristics that couples who sustain a strong sexual connection have, the first one is they're friends who admire and trust each other. It turns out there truly are people who believe that sexual attraction and friendship cannot coexist. So it is very strange for those people to hear me say that liking your partner matters much more than being hot for them.
Yes. That's huge.
But that's what the research says.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I just so love talking to you. Thank you so much for all of this wisdom. And I'm curious, maybe is there a question that I didn't ask that you would like to talk about, or just anything else that last things you want to share?
My favorite topic, and I could talk about it all day. We could talk for 3 hours and I would still feel like there were so many more things we could talk about.
Yes.
So based on the things we've talked about, I want to make sure I say out loud that pleasure is not always the simple, easy thing that maybe we were taught that it is supposed to be. And we absolutely live in a culture that, we don't even have cultural permission to sleep adequately. And sleep is a biological drive without which we literally sicken, you can die of sleep deprivation. And we don't feel like we have permission. I know 18-year-old girls who feel guilty for sleeping. So how on earth are we supposed to be able to prioritize pleasure, especially erotic pleasure? How frivolous, what a waste. And I'm here to tell you that we have been lied to all of our lives about that. And our pleasure is not just good for our health, but it is absolutely necessary that we nourish our bodies and souls, that we nourish our relationships through pleasure in our bodies and shared pleasure in the relationships that matter to us. It is a fuel that bonds us to each other. And particularly, like we started this conversation with how difficult these days are. These days has been at least 5 years. And it's going to be a while before it's not these days. We need each other now more than we have ever. Well, we need each other now wildly. And so sharing pleasure is absolutely foundational to helping all of us have the love and support and energy to transition, to change the world out of these days into the days where joy and abundance and pleasure and rest and kindness feel easy and obvious.
I'm just going to leave a moment for that to sink in. Look forward to those days.
You don't need this because this is going to come out after the election. Everybody, please vote. Please vote. Please vote. Please. Just.
That's very important as well.
My prayer to the world.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. And thank you so much again for just your brilliance in making these things digestible and doable. Because I think that's the beauty part of it. It's like, oh, well, I can actually do this. This feels like a step in the right direction. No, it's not so overwhelming.
I'm so glad you said that, because if you're wondering, did writing come together do the same thing to your sex life that writing Come As You Are did? Yes. Yes, it 100% did. 100% destroyed our sex life. But the difference is that when I got done this time, now I have like a manual so that when things go wrong, I have instructions for what to do so that my husband and I can find our way back to each other. And like the best thing I can say is that I've been following my own advice and it works.
I've learned so much from you, and it's really transformed my relationship as well. So thank you.
I'm so glad.
Yes.
Yay.
And
do you have to talk about it though?
We like to, but this is what I do too. Right. This is what I do. And he's in healthcare. So
right. So he knows.
He's probably one of the reasons that I always felt so comfortable talking about things. Because when we first started dating, he told me he did not want me to be a Pollyanna and just like pretend everything's good when it's not. And I was like, wow, I've never heard that from someone before.
This one. Super sexy.
Yes. And he's always there for it, whatever I brought. So
that's so great.
I'm grateful. Yes. He's open to talking about it. And I think too, it just gets easier over time. That doesn't mean it's never not been hard, because sometimes it is, right? That's just life. There's challenges. It's hard. He had a stroke a few years ago. There's been a lot. There's just all kinds of things that all of us deal with. And you got to stay connected. Stroke's a big deal
around sexual functioning.
Right. And then I think through these other tools, though, there's ways that you can still feel intimately connected and on each other's team. And to help each. So then, because sometimes if someone's not in a place where they can find the room they need to go to, you can help guide them. Right. Or they can help guide you, which is what's so great about the book.
Yes. And look, here's two of us. Both of us have this. We can do it. It doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't mean it's always perfect, but we have the tools to do it. And if we can do it, anybody who's listening to this, even if they're not starting out in a place where their partner feels confident talking about it, you can get to that.
Exactly.
Yay.
And so everyone go out and come together. And is there anything else you want to share about where people can connect with you or?
The main thing, I have a newsletter. If you go to emilynagoski.com, you can sign up for that. And it's mostly me answering people's sex questions, like the question about Peyronie's disease.
Beautiful. And thank you all so much for listening. Thank you so much again for being here, Emily, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. If you loved this episode, please go ahead and forward it right now to someone you know would love it. And if you've not had a chance yet to leave us a rave review on Apple Podcasts, please make sure to rate and review if you enjoyed it, as well as make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you want to stay connected, make sure to go to amandatesta.com/thegoods to download your free sensuality activation and stay connected. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.